I'll draw the diagram and analyze everything. Before drawing the diagram, just a brief about the difference between Hicks and Slutsky. First of all, like previous cases, here also I'm considering a reduction in relative price of X. So our initial budget line, like other cases, will be AB, and initial purchase point will be given by P. Initial purchase point will be given by P, where the indifference curve IC1 is touching the indifference curve. The blue IC is basically touching the black budget line at this point. Okay, so I think it will be better. Don't try to draw the diagram if you are not very confident about this, because it will be best if you draw it with me when I'll go to the board and I'll draw it. So just try to understand the matter, because before drawing, if you have the idea how we will put the matters, it will be easier for you to draw the thing and analyze the matter accordingly. So actually the IC1 is the initial indifference curve, and it is touching the initial budget line AB at point P. So this will be the consumer's equilibrium. Now, as there is a reduction in relative price of X1, other things remaining constant, the budget line will swing to the outward direction. Okay, so new budget line will be given by AB prime. AB prime is flatter than that of AB, indicating a lower relative price of X1. Now, as the consumer faces this budget line, finally, consumer settles at point S, where IC3 is touching the budget line. IC3 is touching the budget line. So movement from P to S, is total effect of relative price change. It is the total effect of relative price change. Now, our interest is to segregate this total effect into substitution effect and income effect following Hicks and Slutsky. Now, by this time, we have understood to do this, we have to fix the real income of the consumer. Now, real income can be fixed in two ways. For Hicks, I'll cut down income from the hand of the individual in such a way so that individual, if like, can consume along the initial indifference curve. So I'll cut down the money in such a way so that individual, if like, can consume along IC1. And for that matter, we are drawing the green budget line HH prime, which is parallel to AB prime, which means HH prime and AB prime indicates the same relative price of X1. However, HH prime has lesser intercept given by OH, and AB has higher intercept given by OA, indicating we have cut down the income AH in such a way so that it can touch the initial indifference curve IC1 at point Q. So if the consumer like with this HH prime budget line can consume at Q or consume along the initial indifference curve IC1. Now movement from P to Q, if I consider, that is only because of change in relative price of X1, because HH prime is flatter than AB, the black one. Okay, HH prime is flatter than that of the black one, the original one. So the movement from P to Q is only because of reduction in relative price of X1. As price of X1 is falling or X1 is becoming cheaper, consumer is consuming more of this commodity, reducing consumption of X2 a bit and increasing consumption of X1. Okay, so this movement from P to Q, that is movement from this point of consumption to this point of consumption, is because of the substitution effect. And for Hicks, however, the consumer finally stop at S, not at Q. So movement from Q to S, that is movement from this level of consumption to this brown level of consumption, is the income effect of relative price change. So this is more or less the Hicksian um, analysis of breaking the total effect between substitution and income effect. Now we are drawing another budget line SS prime, which is passing through the initial purchase point P. Passing through the initial purchase point P. It is not touching the initial indifference curve like Hicks, rather it is passing through the initial consumption point P, because for Slutsky, constancy of purchasing power means I have to snatch away enough income from the hand of the people so that he is left with enough income so that can consume at the initial purchase point. So I am basically drawing a line parallel to AB prime, which is passing through P, Okay, so that is with the income OS, consumer, if like, can consume at P at the initial purchase point. Now, what we found in the last class, this budget line is cutting the IC at P. It is not tangent to IC at P. So this is not the best choice point. It is a choice point. It is a feasible choice point, as the point lies on the SS prime, the budget line, the new hypothetical budget line. It is feasible consumption point. However, it is not the best because it is not the point of tangency between the IC and the indifference curve. So with this budget line SS prime, the consumer can move to a higher indifference curve in the series given by IC2 and consume at R. R is basically the point of tangency between the indifference curve and the newly created budget line SS prime. Okay, so this is the Hicks substitution effect, movement from P to R. And rest will be naturally the income effect, movement from R to S. So what we are finding that for a normal good, this is a normal good case, for a normal good, the Slutsky consumption or the substitution effect is greater than that of Hicks. Slutsky consumption is greater than Hicks consumption. With Hicks, consumer will move from P to Q, and thereby consumption of X1 will increase from this initial level to this level. However, with Slutsky, consumption will increase up to this level. Slutsky substitution effect is more pronounced than Hicks substitution effect in case of normal good. In case of normal good, we are finding that Slutsky substitution effect is greater than that of the Hicks substitution effect. Okay, because individual is altogether moving to a higher indifference curve. Okay, it's not that movement along an indifference curve like Hicks, rather individual is altogether moving to a higher indifference curve, IC2. Okay, so Slutsky substitution effect is stronger than that of Hicks substitution effect. Would you please repeat?
I was asking, you told they are moving to the highest interference for which ICT, like IC3, combining Hicks and Slutsky.
No. I'm talking about IC2. This one. With Hicks, we are along IC1. With Slutsky, consumer is moving to a higher indifference curve, IC2. I'm not talking about
line.
Okay, IC3 is relevant when I am talking about the total effect of relative price change. Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Then we will draw the demand curve corresponding to these effects. Naturally, the Slutsky demand curve will be flatter than that of Hicks because Slutsky substitution effect is stronger than Hicks substitution effect. Slutsky effect is stronger than that of Hicks. So Slutsky demand curve will be like this. In between Hicks and ordinary demand curve, we will have the Slutsky demand curve. So we are coming to this. We will derive these things. So this is our starting point. So now you draw the diagram with me. So consider a two commodity world, X1 and X2 being two commodities. Consider the initial budget line AB. And then because of reduction in price of X1, rotate it from AB to AB prime. So music is going on. So budget line is becoming a flatter budget line AB prime. And then we are first considering Hicks compensated budget line HH prime. The initial budget line is IC1. It is touching both AB and HH prime. It is touching both AB and HH prime. It is touching AB at point P. I'll mark the point later after drawing the Slutsky compensated budget line. I'll mark the point. And the second point of tangency, that is tangency of IC1 and HH prime, that will be Q. Everybody could do it. The Hicks compensated budget line, and actually we are marking P and Q, which will give us the Hickshian substitution effect. Is this part complete for all? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Because if I draw much, you will be not able to understand the nitty-gritties of the thing. Other students, could you complete?
Yes, ma'am.
Others,
Yes, ma'am.
are you sleeping?
Yes.
Understood, ma'am.
Okay. Now I'm drawing a line parallel to AB prime and HH prime, which will pass through this point of tangency. Okay. It will pass through the initial So draw a budget line which is passing through the initial purchase point P. Okay. And now I'll draw another indifference curve. Now with this new budget line, consumer can consume at the initial purchase point. However, given the scope that he can move to a higher indifference curve, he will do that. This is IC2. Now I'll drop the perpendiculars. This is the initial purchase point. This is Hicks purchase point. This is Slutsky purchase point. Today I'll mark the quantities with x1 naught, x1 1, x1 naught, x1 1 and x1 2. This point is P. This point is Q. Q is this point of tangency, and this point is R. PQR. I'll also extend these quantities in the second diagram because later we need this. This is the initial price. Okay. And I am also drawing the reduced price and keeping it like this. Now I am drawing the final indifference curve. This is IC3. And also dropping perpendicular from it. Okay. So first, let me draw the ordinary demand curve. This is the ordinary demand curve because it is based on total effect of relative price change. It is the ordinary one. Next, we will consider two compensated demand curves. This is based on Hicks substitution effect. So it is the Hicks compensated demand curve. And next, this point is there. This is the Slutsky compensated demand curve. Okay, and this last thing, this point I am marking as S, PQRS. S may be a bit problematic, I think, because in Slutsky also I'm using S. So T. Okay. So now tell me if anyone has any problem in understanding any part of the diagram.
Ma'am, I have a doubt, but it's not related to the diagram.
Yes. What's that?
Uh, Ma'am, in Hicks, we cut the income in such a way that we remain on the same indifference curve. And
Yes.
in Slutsky, we cut the income that we remain at the same point of consumption. So,
Yes.
ma'am, both P and Q lie on the same indifference curve, IC1. So, shouldn't Slutsky's approach be a part of Hicksian approach only, like a special case?
No, it is a different kind of approach. The broad thing is same, that we have some total effect of relative price change, and then there is a difference when we are making a segregation between substitution effect and income effect. So Hicks approach is based on indifference curve analysis. Hicks is adjusting the income in such a way so that the consumer can remain on the same indifference curve. And to Hicks, this is the meaning of constancy of purchasing power. While Slutsky is telling that constancy of the purchasing power means we have to fix the adjusted income in such a way so that the consumer can purchase at initial consumption point. So for Slutsky, it is immaterial whether IC1 or IC2 or IC3. He is putting the matter in this way. I have to consider that amounts of X1 and X2 which the consumer used to purchase without incorporation the change in the price. So Slutsky's focus is on a point, whereas Hicks' focus is on indifference curve. Slutsky's approach you can continue without the indifference curve as well. If I have the data that individual used to purchase 3 oranges and 2 apples before any change in the price of orange, I'll be able to do that. What is his indifference curve? Slutsky does not bother about that. he is looking at the quantities consumed. So his focus is on the point, whereas Hicks' focus is on the indifference curve. So these two approaches are a bit different. Actually, today I told you our focus is on difference of these two approaches. So when we will conclude the entire matter, we will say that Slutsky's approach is more realistic in the sense that every individual will be able to understand the concept. I'm adjusting the income in such a way so that you can consume two oranges, three apples, or three oranges, two apples. This is understandable to everybody. However, Hicks' approach is a bit theoretical. Those who have knowledge about indifference curve, the students of economics, they will understand this approach, this idea. However, to a layman, if you tell them, I'll cut down your income or I'll give you some amount so that you can lie on the same indifference curve, what they will understand? They will understand nothing. Okay. So, indifference curve,
He will think we are robbing him.
uh, I didn't get you.
He will think we are robbing him by taking away his money.
Um, no, Hicks approach is based on what I want to tell you. Hicks approach is based on the indifference curve approach, and for that matter, it is not understandable to the entire world. Okay, so you cannot explain what is meant by substitution effect, what is meant by income effect. When we are changing our purchase, basically there are two things which are working in the mechanism. This you will be able to make understand anybody with Slutsky approach. However, it is very difficult to analyze this thing or make people understanding this entire concept, using Hicks approach.
Okay,
Don't
ma'am.
don't you think that approach based on indifference curve approach is a bit theoretical, whereas the approach, which is based on these amounts of x and y I used to consume, and I'll adjust my income in such a way so that I can purchase the same amounts of x and y if I like, isn't it more realistic?
Yes, ma'am, it's also a lot clearer.
Okay. Okay, so these are the things today we will discuss. Now tell me whether you could complete the drawing of the things. Here also, please mark down the points. And this is the case for normal good. This is SS prime. With Hicks, we are cutting more income. With Slutsky, we are cutting lesser income. There is a gap between Hicks and Slutsky budget line given by HS. Okay, Slutsky budget line lies to the right of Hicksian budget line. So if you could complete this entire thing, I'll give you a brief note on this. So everybody could complete it, and can you tell me what will be the number of the diagrams? 9. Anyone?
Yes, ma'am. Nine. Nine.
Figure 9A and 9B. Okay. So please add. We have so far considered both the substitution and income effects. We have so far considered both the substitution and income effects to construct individual's demand curve, for a certain commodity. Next, in certain cases, however, we need to take into account only the substitution effect. We need to take into account only the substitution effect. The demand curves generated by considering the demand curves generated on the basis of substitution effect is called the income compensated. The demand curve based solely on substitution effect is called the income compensated demand curve. Curves. In figure or using figures 9a and 9b, we derived Hicks and Slutsky compensated demand curves and compare them with ordinary uncompensated demand curves for normal goods.
Please repeat this last part.
Using figures 9a and 9b, we derived the Hicks compensated and Slutsky compensated demand curves and compared them. We derive, make it derive rather than derived. We derive the Hicks compensated and Slutsky compensated demand curves and compare them with ordinary uncompensated demand curve for the normal goods. Done?
Yes, ma'am.
Next para. Hicks approach corresponds to the set of budget lines. Hicks' approach corresponds to the set of budget lines tangent to single indifference curve, set of budget lines tangent to single indifference curve, whereas Slutsky approach corresponds to rotating budget lines about the original best choice bundle. Rotate the budget line at the original best choice bundle as shown in figure 9a. A movement from P to Q measures Hicksian substitution effect. Okay, H prime, or you can write the budget line H prime indicates the same initial purchasing power. The budget line H prime indicates the same initial purchasing power, but a lower relative price of x1. Situation R is what Slutsky would have called a compensated change in income, from situation P. Income at R is less than that in P. Income at R is less than that in P by just enough so that is just enough so that at the lower price of, so that at the lower price of x1, at the lower price of x1, the consumer could, at the lower price of x1, the consumer could, if he would like to buy, consumer could, if he would like to buy, the same amount of x1 and x2, same amount of x1 and x2 he bought at the initial situation. He bought at the initial situation. However, at the new price, the consumer deliberately selects. But at the new price, the consumer deliberately selects the higher IC, deliberately selects the higher IC given by IC2 and consumes at R. Consumes at R. AB and SS prime, AB and SS prime have the same real income, but SS prime has a lower relative price of x1. SS prime has a lower relative price of x1 than AB. Hence, the movement from P to R, gives the direction and magnitude of the movement from P to R gives the direction and magnitude of substitution effect. Gives the direction and magnitude of substitution effect. Thus, Hicks substitution effect is x11 minus x1 naught. Hicks substitution effect is x11 minus x1 naught. Whereas the Slutsky substitution effect is, what is Slutsky substitution effect?
x1
Anyone?
2 minus
X1
x1
2
0.
minus X1 not.
Slutsky substitution effect is x1 2 minus x1 naught. The difference between Hicks and Slutsky substitution effect is, the difference between Hicks and Slutsky substitution effect is x1 2 minus x1 1. On the basis of these substitution effects, we can derive Hicks and Slutsky compensated demand curves. On the basis of these substitution effects, we can derive Hicks and Slutsky compensated demand curves. Next para. In figure 9a, as price of x1 falls, real income of consumer increases. Real income of the consumer increases. AB prime has a higher real income than HH prime. AB prime has higher real income than HH prime. Hence, movement from Q to T provides the income effect of relative price change. In or following Hickshian terminology, next TE equal to AC plus IE equal to x1 1 minus x1 naught plus x1 3 minus x1 1 is equal to x1 3 minus x1 naught. Next, again, AB prime has a higher real income. AB prime has a higher real income compared to Slutsky budget line, SS prime. and the movement from R to T, provides the income effect of relative price change. Thus, following Slutsky terminology, total effect is equal to AC plus IE is equal to x12 minus x10 plus x13 minus x12 equal to x13 minus x1. So ultimate total effect is same. Next, on the basis of this total effect, we derive the ordinary or Marshallian demand curve.
Ma'am, could you
Ma'am,
please repeat this line?
yes, ma'am.
Ordinary demand curve. Oh, on the basis of the total effect, we derive the ordinary or Marshallian demand curve. Total effect is same both for Hicks and Slutsky, and on the basis of this we will draw the ordinary or Marshallian demand curve. So if you look at the diagram, we have only one ordinary demand curve. It's not that for Hicks it will be something, for Slutsky it will be something, because ultimately the difference is there in defining the constancy of the purchasing power, and therefore the difference is there in the substitution effect. And therefore there is a difference in Hicks compensated and Slutsky compensated demand curve. However, the ordinary demand curve is identical. Ordinary demand curve is same both for Hicks and Slutsky. So on the basis of this total effect, we derive the ordinary or the Marshallian demand curve. Paragraph. In case of normal goods, ordinary demand curve is flatter than both the, in case of normal goods, ordinary demand curve is flatter than both Hickshian and Slutsky, both the Hickshian and Slutsky income compensated demand curves. In case of normal goods, ordinary demand curve is flatter than both the Hickshian and Slutsky income compensated demand curves. Hicks demand curve is steeper than Hicks demand curve, that means Hicks compensated demand curve is steeper than Slutsky compensated demand curve. Thus, the Slutsky demand curve lies in between Slutsky demand curve lies in between Hicks and Hicks and ordinary demand curves. Slutsky demand curve is lying in between Hicks and ordinary demand curves. I'm just giving a para on inferior goods, and then we will come to the diagrammatic analysis. In case of inferior goods, Hicks demand curve is flatter than, in case of inferior goods, Hicks demand curve is flatter than ordinary and Slutsky demand curves. So we will see that in case of inferior goods, Hicks demand curve will be flatter than both the ordinary and the Slutsky demand curves. So in case of inferior goods, Hicks demand curve is flatter than ordinary and Slutsky demand curves. Ordinary demand curve is steeper than Slutsky demand curve. Ordinary demand curve is steeper than Slutsky demand curve. And again, Slutsky compensated demand lies in between, and again Slutsky compensated demand lies in between ordinary and Hicks demand curves. Paragraph. In practice, Slutsky income compensated demand curve is more useful. In practice, Slutsky income compensated demand curve is more useful. It is possible to keep the consumer at the initial purchase point. At the initial purchase point, however, it is impossible to keep them. However, it is impossible to keep them on the same indifference curve. Okay. Now with this, first we have to do the case for the inferior good. We have to do the case for the inferior good. Just have a look on this. This will be the case for the standard inferior goods. Okay, so I'll also draw. Just check the matter. I'm coming within a minute. Could you understand the matter for the inferior commodities? Look, we will draw the diagram, Look what is happening here. First of all, the income effect and substitution effect will move to the opposite direction. So again, we will consider a reduction in relative price of X1. So this black line will be the budget line given by AB, and this red one will be the rotated one, the final budget line AB prime. And we will draw IC1 following the similar kind of thing. So, and the Hicks budget line will touch this IC1 at a different point, whereas by Slutsky, we will be able to move to a higher indifference curve. And again, we will be able to move to further a high indifference curve IC3 if I consider the total effect of relative price change. However, look at this diagram. First, by Hicks substitution effect, I'm coming here. And then by income effect, I'm moving to the opposite direction. For Slutsky, the substitution effect is less pronounced in case of inferior good. So why it is happening? Why in case of ordinary commodities, normal goods income effect, the Slutsky substitution effect is more stronger, whereas for the inferior good, by substitution effect, we are moving to a lesser amount of X1 compared to Hicks. That also we need to understand. If it is a normal good, Slutsky substitution effect is greater than that of Hicks. If it is an inferior good, Slutsky substitution effect is less than that of Hicks substitution effect. Why this is happening, that also we need to understand. Now, whatever be the thing, R is to the right of Q, and again S is to the right of both Q and R. So, via income effect for Slutsky, we will move from this to this level, from this level to this level. Okay, so this is the violet one is the substitution effect, the yellow one is the income effect for Slutsky. So finally we are at S in context of inferior goods. However, if you consider the income effect for both Hicks and Slutsky in this case, ultimately the demand for the commodity is increasing a bit from X1 naught. This is X1 3. So ultimately demand is increasing by this amount, and therefore the demand curves will still remain negatively sloped. This is the ordinary demand curve, which is capturing the increase in demand from X1 naught to X1 3, and this is still negatively sloped. This is still negatively sloped because whatever be the volume of income effect, the substitution effect cannot offset the income effect. Therefore, the ordinary or the Marshallian demand curve is still negatively sloped. Okay, and compensated demand curve will be always negatively sloped. So this is the Hicks compensated demand curve. This is the Slutsky compensated demand curve. And as I mentioned, for all the cases, Slutsky will lie in between Hicks and ordinary. In case of the normal good, the ordinary demand curve was the flattest demand curve. This has the least slope among all these three, and this is the Hicks demand curve. Slutsky is lying in between ordinary and Hicks. Here too, Slutsky is lying in between Hicks and ordinary. Slutsky is lying in between Hicks and ordinary. Okay, so this is the idea. And
Ma'am, this is the first case. Yeah, okay.
This is the first case. This is the normal good case. By first case, what do you...
Ma'am, inferior goods, we did 3 cases. Now that income effect is stronger than substitution effect, then equal, and then greater.
Yeah, this is the first case. Yes, that's true. First case in case of inferior goods. And this is the case where we consider the Giffen good. Okay, the rest of the things will be same, only the position of S will be to the left of P. Position of S will be to the left of P, and thereby we will get a positively sloped ordinary demand curve, a positively sloped ordinary demand curve. So one by one, we will consider the case for a standard inferior goods, and we will also consider the case for Giffen good. Okay. So let's try to do these things. So first we are doing the case for the inferior goods. This is the initial budget line AB. This is the budget line after change in P1, after reduction in P1. This is the Hicks compensated budget line. Okay. Now I'll draw the initial indifference curve, IC1. This is IC1. It's really very difficult to draw these things using e-board. This will be a smooth curve like this. However, it is really, really very difficult to draw it. Since this surface is very slippery, it's really difficult. This is IC1. And I'm dropping perpendicular from this point. This is the original, this is indicating the original consumption of X1. Now I'll draw another budget line. Which will pass through this point. This one. So let me draw the another IC. Now when I'll draw the IC, the point of tangency will be to the left of Q. So be careful about this. This is IC2. So let me drop the perpendicular as well. this corresponds to point R. That is, this is giving Slutsky substitution effect. Okay. And ultimately, this is T. So this point was basically P. This green thing, that is Q. This is R. This is P1. This is the reduced price P2. Okay. So up to this, is there any doubt? Just now I'll join the points to draw the demand curves, ordinary as well as the compensated demand curves. If anyone has any problem in drawing the matter, R is to the left of Q and T is to the left of R. So draw the things in this way.
Ma'am, why is R to the left of Q?
I told you we have to understand why Hicks substitution effect is stronger than Slutsky one in case of inferior goods, whereas in case of normal goods, Slutsky substitution effect is stronger than Hicks. Let's first complete this part. This we will discuss after this.
Okay, ma'am.
Hello, sir. Bolu. This I have to do actually. So let us first finish this. So first I am drawing the ordinary curve. This is the ordinary or the Marshallian demand curve. This is Slutsky. This is Hicks. So this is x1 naught. Hicks is given by x11. Slutsky is given by x12. And the final is given by x13. It be. Anyone, any problem, any part I need to explain? Already I have added a para for the inferior goods. Is it clear? Yes or no? You could you complete
Yes,
this
ma'am.
thing? Anyone, any question? Everybody could do this thing? Rosmin, Parthiv?
Ma'am, show the diagram, please.
Ma'am,
Yes.
I'm not sure the substitution effect is greater than the income effect, right?
Substitution effect is?
Greater than the income effect.
Yeah, if substitution effect is greater than income effect. Yes.
Yes.
Substitution effect is greater than opposite income effect. Yes. So let me mark the substitution and income effects too. This is Hicks substitution effect. This is
Screen.
Slutsky substitution effect. this is Hicks income effect moving to the opposite direction. This is Slutsky income effect. Blue for Slutsky, green for Hicks. And as you mentioned, absolutely right, substitution effect is stronger than income effect. The volume of the substitution effect, both in case of Hicks and Slutsky, is greater than that of income effects. Any other question? Anything else? Everyone could complete it, yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
So now,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, very good. So now in that case, we will go for Giffen good case. Same thing. Just income effect will be stronger than that of the substitution effect. I see one. Drawing a budget line parallel to Hicks and final budget line, however passing through this point of tangency. And consumer is moving. Hello. হ্যাঁ বলুন। Hicks substitution effect. Inferior goods. So we will move to this direction. IC2. This is for Slutsky. Okay. And finally, this is the income effect, which is to the left of the initial consumption point P, which is to the left of the initial consumption point P. Okay. Initial price, reduced price. Okay, so before drawing the diagrams, let me mark the points. Remember that this is a special type of inferior goods. Sorry, this way. I have to start with x1 naught so that everything remains perfect. Is it clear? Now, if this part is clear, I'll join the points and draw the demand curves only. Anyone, any problem, any question? T is to the left of P. T is to the left of P. So I'll start with the ordinary demand curve. It is positively sloped. This is the ordinary demand curve. And I'll also draw the Hicks and Slutsky compensated demand curves. This is the original consumption point. So this is Hicks and this is Slutsky. Okay, let me mark the income effect, etc. This is the income effect of Hicks, whereas this is the, sorry, this is the substitution effect. The lesser is the volume of substitution effect, higher is the amount of income effect. So income effect is offsetting the substitution effect. Income effect is moving to the opposite direction and it is offsetting the substitution effect. So this part is for Hicks and for Slutsky substitution effect. Slutsky income effect. So for Slutsky, again, the things are moving to the opposite direction and income effect is stronger than that of the substitution effect. Income effect is stronger than the substitution effect. The gray lines, gray arrows are indicating the cases for Slutsky. Violet arrows are indicating the amounts for Hicks. So if any one of you have any question for this part, please ask me. This is the these are 11A, 11B.
Yes, ma'am.
Everybody could complete this.
Just 1 minute.
Everybody could complete it now. Just tell me, could you complete this?
Ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am. Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
Anything, any part you could not understand in the drawing, or uh, the substitution effect, income effect, measurement, what is happening in case of standard inferior good, what is happening in case of given good. These things are okay with you, all of you? Yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes, ma'am.
ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Pranjali, Saina, what about you? Everything is understandable, Pranjali?
Yes, ma'am.
Saina? Not here. Moyantika?
Yes, ma'am, no problem.
So now the last thing, why there is a difference between Hicks and Slutsky when we are measuring substitution effect. In case of normal good, it is greater, and in case of inferior goods, it is lesser. Now, very carefully look at the difference between Hicks and Slutsky real income. Okay, so look at the vertical intercept for Hicks and Slutsky. Be it the given good, be it the normal good, be it the inferior good, any case, any case. Okay, so what you are finding, OS is greater than OH or something else? What are you getting out of three diagrams?
Ma'am,
Hicks
Ma'am.
repeat the
intercept
Oh,
is
question.
greater than Slutsky, or Slutsky is greater than Hicks? Higgs intercept is greater than Slutsky, or Slutsky intercept is greater than Higgs?
let's key.
Vertical intercept.
Ma'am, Slutsky is greater.
Great, ma'am.
For all three cases,
Yes, ma'am.
now you have the diagrams with you for all three cases. Here I forgot to mark the points. I hope everybody could mark it. So OS is greater than OH under all circumstances. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
First, please note down that. Please write down. Comparing Higgs compensation and Slutsky compensation principles, we find that comparing Higgs compensation and Slutsky compensation principles, we find that OS is always greater than OS is always greater than OH, indicating that in case of Slutsky, consumers are left with higher real income. Consumers are left with higher real income compared to Hicks. Are you getting this point? Everybody is getting this point? If I compare Hicks and Slutsky real incomes, under all circumstances, when we are taking away money, trying to fix the constancy of purchasing power, Slutsky is giving more money compared to Hicks. Or in case of
Yes, ma'am.
people are left with more money compared to Hicks. So this is fine with all of you. Okay, now if the commodity, I don't write, I'll give you the writer. Just let me find out the. Now, if you consider the case of the normal good, in case of the normal good, having more income, you will spend more on X1 or less on X1. You have more
More.
income in your hand compared to Hicks with Slutsky. So if you have more income, you will spend more on X1 because the concerned commodity is a normal good. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
On the other hand, if the concerned commodity is an inferior one, in that case, if I have more money in my hand, what I'll do, I'll consume less X1. Am I right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So if X1 is an inferior and I have more money in my hand, after substitution effect, my shift to the right will be lesser because I have more money. And, you know,
It is an
therefore,
inferior good.
this is an inferior good. Yes. And when I have lesser money, I have lesser money. However, the concerned commodity is a normal good. As OS is greater than OH, there will be some extra consumption of X1. If it is inferior good, there will be some lesser consumption of X1. Because whenever I have more money, if it is an inferior good, I'll buy less. If it is a normal good, I'll buy more. So by this logic, R will be to the right of Q if it is a normal good, and R will be to the left of Q if it is an inferior good. Okay. So,
Ma'am, but if there is more like purchasing power, that is income, then it is considered an income effect. So how is that effect also affecting substitution effect?
okay, good question. Income effect measures how much change in demand will occur because of change in real income. It does that. Substitution effect measures what will be the change in demand because of change in price only. However, if I am on a higher budget line, apart from compensation, etc., if I am initially at a higher budget line, if it is a normal good, I'll buy more of that commodity with higher covered area of the budget line. And if it is an inferior good, I'll buy less. So forget about substitution effect, income effect. Let me consider another diagram. So nothing related to substitution effect, income effect. This is my budget line under one circumstance, and this is other. I got some bonus, say, so for 1 month, my income has increased to this level. Okay, forget about substitution effect, income effect, anything. Okay, so with the black budget line, I am consuming this much of X1, this much of X2. And if all the commodities are normal, my behavior will be like this. Okay, now I am bringing indifference curve, how we are getting this particular point along this black line, how I am getting exactly this point along the red line. For deriving these points, we are bringing in our analysis the indifference curve so that these points are not any point. This point is a fixed one, which is utility maximizing one. So if this is a normal good, forget about price effect, income effect, etc. This will happen, yes or no?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, if I consider again the same scenario, because of some bonus, my income has increased. Or I'm facing another budget line, which is above the green one. Okay. Now X1 is an inferior good. Whenever I'll have more money in my hand,
The demand decreases.
in spite of the fact of understanding why this is happening, etc., I'll always like to consume less of an inferior good. My taste and preference will suggest this. I'll consume, my rationality will suggest this. I'll consume less of inferior goods. Okay, so it's not that here we are thinking that a part of the income effect is coming inside, not like that. I have higher amount of money in my hand and I'll buy lesser of the one which is inferior in nature. Okay, then we are analyzing, how substitution effect and income effect is justifying this amount of consumption. However, remember this point: if you have higher budget, in that case always you will buy less of the necessity. Okay, this is the human nature. Because of the nature of the commodity, because of your rationality, you will buy less of that commodity. Is it okay?
Less of which
Yes, ma'am.
commodity, ma'am?
Less of the inferior commodity.
Yes, ma'am.
So this I am telling you now. So actually this is the higher budget to begin with, and therefore you will buy more of a normal good if it is a normal good case, and it will, if it is an inferior good, you will buy less. Okay, though the commodities become cheaper, your rationality is suggesting it is an inferior good in that, and therefore you will increase consumption. However, your increment in consumption will not that much what you will get in the other context. Okay. So what I told you, intercept is higher. Okay. And therefore always the individual is lying on a higher budget line. So please write down with higher budget in hand. With higher budget in hand, in case of a normal good, consumption will be greater. Consumption will be greater than as it is. Possible with as it is possible with Hicks'ian case. Hicks'ian case. On the other hand, if the concerned commodity is an inferior one, with a higher budget, consumer will substitute lesser x2 by x1. Consumer will substitute lesser x2 by x1 as x1 is inferior to him. Okay, so x2 is not inferior to me, only x1 is inferior. So it is now cheaper and I am substituting some x2 by x1, however, not that much. What I'll do if the concerned commodity is a normal one. So this is the idea. Okay, is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Others, everybody?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so just an ending paragraph, okay, where I'll tell you, suppose I'm withdrawing this change. So, here I'm considering this is the initial situation and then there will be a change. Now I'm considering one step further. Suppose I'm withdrawing this change. question is whether the consumption will settle back to the original level, or for Slutsky, I'll get this change. For Hicks, I'll get this change. However, for ordinary, I'll not get this change. It is not that easy to come back to the original solution. What is the matter? So if there is a sudden shock, say, in an economy, and for that matter, all of our individual income changes, and for that matter, say consumption is changing, rather to say if the price of the commodity is changing for sudden shock in the economy, and for that matter, consumption pattern is changing. Now, if the shock is removed, will it be easy to come back to the original position? Okay. Or
No,
once,
ma'am.
yeah. So that you are telling, you know, subjectively, also objectively, we need to understand using the Hicks and Slutsky approach, whether we will be able to settle back to P once every change is withdrawn, or it will be not that easy to settle back to P. Okay, what happens in Hicksian case, what happens in Slutsky case, etc. So here there is an analysis given by Mosaic, and now we will conclude this entire thing, bringing Mosaic's view in this respect. Okay, so let's consider that. Next para. If we consider the normal good case, the difference between Hicks and Slutsky approach is, x13, sorry, x12 minus x11, this. The difference between Hicks and Slutsky approach is, within bracket, x12 minus x11. The fundamental proposition given by Mosaic.
Can you repeat this line? X12 minus
x11. Look at this. Look at this value. x12 minus x11. The fundamental proposition given by Mosaic is that as delta P1, that means change in P1, moves towards 0, the term x12 minus x11, the term x12 minus x11 approaches 0 more rapidly, than any other difference. Approaches 0 more rapidly than any other difference. It is of course true It is of course true that as delta P1 moves towards 0, T, R, and Q, T, R, and Q all tend to converge to, all tend to converge to point P. This means that within bracket x13 minus x12, comma, within bracket x13 minus x11, next within bracket x13 minus x1 naught what I said, the values, would you please repeat once again?
Ma'am, x1 3
x13
minus
minus x12, x13 minus x11, x13 minus x1 naught.
The last one, there is a mistake in the last one. It will be not x1 naught. I'm coming just a minute. দুটো income effect হয়ে গেছে, and you have to write two substitution effects, that is x1 minus x1 naught and x12 minus x1 naught.
ma'am,
No,
could you
instead of
repeat
x1
please?
3 minus x1 naught, what are we writing?
Two substitution effects. Look at the projection. x11 minus x1 naught and x12 minus x1 naught. When two income effects I told you earlier, two substitution effects, now you have to write. Done?
Yes, ma'am.
And the fifth one is the difference between Hicks and Slutsky. And within bracket x12 minus x11. So two income effect, two substitution effects, and the difference between Hicks and Slutsky. All go to zero, all will move to 0. This means that all these values will move towards 0 as delta P1 approaches 0. However, x12 minus x11 is, however, x12 minus x11 is different from all these, other quantities,
However, what did
in
you say after that?
that,
I couldn't hear.
is different from all these other quantities in that it approaches zero more rapidly in the sense that limit x12 minus x11 divided by x13 minus x10 in the sense that the limit x12 minus x11 divided by the total effect x13 minus x10 tends to 0 as delta p1 tends to 0 as delta p1 tends to 0 tends to 0, but the limit of say x13 minus x12 divided by x13 minus x10. You can consider any amount in the numerator, any other possible ratios, but the limit of say this as delta p1 approaches 0, is not necessarily 0. So when you are withdrawing the changes, the gap between Hicks and Slutsky, that will be eliminated first. However, other differences that you moved to this amount by substitution effect or income effect, these changes are not that easy. These are approaches, these things approaches 0 not necessarily indicate that they will reach at 0. This has the implication that the Slutsky measure of the change in money income needed to keep needed to keep real income constant, needed to keep real income constant, is a good approximation, is a good approximation to the ideal, to the ideal change in, to the ideal change in money income, to the ideal change in money income. Okay. So this is all for today. Now the all three cases we have done. The difference of Hicks and Slutsky for normal, standard inferior, Giffen goods. These things you have to do using increase in relative price of X1. So please add a homework. Analyze the difference between Hicks approach and Slutsky approach using an increase in relative price of X1, using an increase in relative price of X1. And this will complete this section. Okay. So now the things are left, with us is discussing the context of price elasticity of demand using PCC, price consumption curve, then deriving income consumption curve, and from there Angel curve, and discussing income elasticities of demand using those income consumption curve and Angel curves. I think in mathematical economics class you have done several things. Okay, so we need to analyze all these things in detail in the microeconomics class as well. Okay, I think it is better that I'll stop here, because Friday we will go for the revision class for the part you have in your internal assessment or midterm examination, and after that I'll complete these parts, the ICC and elasticity related matter, or if you like I can start the elasticity discussion from the price consumption curve. What I'll do, okay, what I'll do, I'll start the price consumption elasticity thing after giving a break